So the album that we're talking about is called Upon Desolation, and it's the second Mortuous album, which came out on September 16th through Carbonized Records. You mentioned that Mike had written a batch of songs. I think you said almost 20 songs. When did you realize that you guys were ready to go into the studio and record this?
I mean, there was a lot leading up to this recording. I had two surgeries on my lower back in the at the end of 2020, and I had to pretty much like recover from that before I could even like start like relearning the songs because Mike had sent us the songs and we'd like play around with them like on our own. But I mean, I'd injured myself at the end of 2019 and didn't really know what was going on until the end of 2020, and that's when I was told I needed surgery. So I had the surgeries and I spent 6 months kind of recovering from that before I was able to even like get behind a drum set. But we had a plan like 2022. We want to do some shows. We want to tour. We have all these songs. Like, let's, if we're gonna tour, we need a new album. If we're gonna, get any sort of like movement with the band, like we need to like have a new album because you know, by this year it had been 4 years since Through Wilderness came out. So it's just, it was long overdue. So basically from June of 2021, we decided, hey, well, let's make a plan. We're going to record in December. We're going to book a whole month at Earhammer with Greg. And just like, we're going to spend the next 6 months getting ready for that. And, this whole time we were getting ready by practicing and just getting the songs all together. And I was also like, having to rebuild my body back into drumming shape and also learn these songs that like technically wise, like I had never played drums like this before in my life. Yeah, I've played death metal for over a decade, but I've never played it at this level. And I had to like really like, push myself to get to that point because I didn't want to get there 6 months later and not even be ready to record and just waste time and money in the studio. And I mean, it took a lot of perseverance and a lot of like willpower to like stick to the program. But ultimately, when we got there in December, I was like, I think I was like the most ready I've ever been for recording. I couldn't believe it when I finished tracking in 2 days. I've never done that for any project before that was like, death metal oriented. Like, yeah, punk bands, like, you don't need a lot of time to record that stuff. But, for a death metal album, like, it always takes me way more time. But this time I was just like overly prepared. I was just like shocked, like at myself. And I mean, the whole plan that we put into place and my, recovery plan, it just like, all of it really paid off, and I'm just like really proud of that process.
So in terms of your approach to the drums on this album, uh, what changed for you, and how did the change in style affect the way that you had to create drums for this album? Because there is a little bit more of this, not to name drop, but this kind of like immolation, tricky rhythms going on the new Mortuous album.
Yeah, I mean, Mike pretty much like he had a roadmap of how he wanted the drums to sound when he came up with these songs, and I just wanted to nail that as best I could because like what he was coming up with was just like some of the craziest drums I've like ever heard, and also just like, wow, like if I gotta play that, I gotta like really step it up. And I mean, I practiced so much for this album just on my own because like, we were still dealing with COVID times and like we couldn't all get together. Like, none of us had gotten like the vaccine just because it was still way too early. Only like, people who are eligible to get it were getting it. We were just trying to play it as safe as possible because none of us wanted to get COVID. I don't know if any of us had it up until then. I didn't get it until this year for the first time. And so we were just like really trying to be safe, and so I was practicing at home a lot. I was listening to the songs like every day, just really trying to like immerse myself in it, because it was just, if I didn't if I didn't step up to the plate and like get it done, like we were just gonna have such a hard time in the studio. And I also just didn't want the drums to be like edited or in any sort of way. Like, obviously there's like cleanup that you have to do in any recording, but like I wanted the takes to be perfect. I wanted to be like so stoked on this recording that like I could look back and be like, damn, I crushed that. And I mean, with the approach to it, it was just like, you got to go big or go home. And I also just didn't want to let my band down, because it was like, we have all these songs, let's do them like, the way that they were written. And it's like, I feel like the songs are like pretty much exactly as close as the original versions as they are on the album. And I mean, it's just crazy even like hearing back and just like, damn, I can't believe that's me. Or it's like, because it's like I was basically like playing to like a recording already. Like, there was a computer that was killing it, and I wanted to be just as good as like a computer programmed drums.
Well, can you explain a little bit more about why the drums for this album were more challenging? Because they're not necessarily faster, right? You're not playing faster on this album, but it's more of like, I don't want to say technical, but it is rhythmically more tricky, right, than what the previous Mortuous albums were.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. Like these songs were recorded, like the tempos are an even tempo throughout the album, because we wanted it to be like cohesive. We didn't want things to be super crazy fast, but also not crazy slow. Like, I mean, if you try to play these songs like at all, it's going to be difficult, and it might not sound like it's very fast, but I don't know, like these songs are definitely way more technical than any other type of songs I've ever had to learn or play in my entire life. So, I mean, I don't really know how else to describe it. It's like the drums are technical, the drums are like, I'm just trying to think of a good way to explain it. It's just,
Well, I mean, if you're comfortable with technical, then we can say technical. I know some people, some bands are not crazy about that word because of what it implies.
oh, I mean, it's like people have all these preconceived notions about and labels, they're like wary about labels, but it's like these songs are like way more technical than Through Wilderness. Like, yeah, songwriting, they're very similar, but like as far as like the musicianship, like you have to like really be a technical player to like even like knock this out. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's a drummer that is out there that'll like, they could just like hear it once and just like crush it. But like for me, like, growing up playing punk music, like, and now being able to like play this type of like death metal that I did on like Upon Desolation, it's just like it blows my mind that I was even able to achieve that. Where it's like, there's people who have got years on me playing like technical or like crazy brutal, death metal, and like they could do it no problem. But it's like for me, it was like an accomplishment that I could even like get to that level, and just, and like people are like stoked on it. And I didn't have to do any like crazy studio tricks. I just did it all in like like pretty much like all these songs are recorded in one take. Like when we got the drum set on the first day, I nailed all 8 songs like in 3 hours before we wrapped for the day. We listened to them. They were way too fast, but they're still sick. They sounded great. But we went back the next day, and in 4 hours, I nailed all 8 songs again at the tempos that we wanted. Very minimal cleanup. Like there's no real studio magic except for just, the usual mixing that you do. It's just, I don't know. Like a lot of people can't really say that after the fact. It's like, I wanted to play drums that I could play live, in a live setting without like having to like compromise or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So we spoke a little bit about how this material is more technical than the previous Mortuous albums. How else would you say that the sound has evolved?
Trying to think. I mean, the sound like on like compared to like Through Wilderness is very death doom, like heavy, and I mean it's more focused on that like Paradise Lost incantation sort of feeling, whereas like the new one is way more technical. Like I like to refer to it as like, kind of suffocation meets My Dying Bride, but I feel like what you said, like immolation, definitely makes more sense. It's like suffocation is like definitely a lot more like, it's like very technically like forward, and I love suffocation for that. But like, yeah, immolation, I feel like kind of has that groove, and Mortuous has that groove too. And people I've even like heard say that this album is like super melodic, which yeah, I can hear that too. But like, I always like when I was like explaining it to people, I was always like, oh, it's like Suffo meets My Dying Bride. It's got like these super technical parts, but like we still have that Death Doom feeling that we had on the old one. But the more times I listen to it, I feel like the Death Doom kind of aspect that we brought on Through Wilderness, it kind of took a step back, and we kind of went more technical and more like I guess just more riff forward, where we just wanted to like pummel people with like this technical, like it was like a technical assault, but like there's also like the brooding like doom that was just like around the corner sort of thing. Like I feel like both albums, they stand on their own, whereas like one is a very Death Doom forward album, the other one is a very more technical forward album, if that makes sense.